Independent, in-depth, inside EWN on 702. Live online, the 702 app, and a DSTV.
It's 6 minutes past 8 o'clock. Good evening and welcome to Inside Eyewitness News. My name is Mahlatsi Mahlase. I'm editor-in-chief of Eyewitness News. In this hour, we are in discussion with the country's leading editors. And tonight we are asking, is President Cyril Ramaphosa a powerless scarecrow against corruption? This is what alliance partner COSATU suggested earlier in the week. So we will be looking at the twists and turns of the ANC in its attempts to take steps against corruption. It's a virtual roundtable, and we are also live on the EWN Facebook page if you want to see us. Of course, we'd like to hear from you. You can SMS us on 31702 or 31567. If you want to call in, we are on 011 883 0702. And if you're in the Western Cape listening to us via Cape Talk, you can call us on 021 446 0561.
Make sense of the week that was. Prepare for the week to come. Inside EWN on 702.
Let me try that number again. It's 021 446 0567. Sorry for misleading you there. But as I said, it is the virtual roundtable, and I'm joined on Inside EWN by Eyewitness News senior political reporter Theto Mahlakwana, Newsroom Africa political editors Bungalwa, and News 24 political editor Juanita Hunter. Happy Women's Day to Theto and Juanita. Thank you very much, ladies, for spending the day with us. And of course, our honorary member tonight is Bungwala. Good evening, and thank you very, very much for joining us. As I said, we are live on Facebook, on the EWN's Facebook page. I'm going to start with reading just an excerpt of what COSATU actually had to say in case our listeners missed it. And part of it says, while the hydra of corruption predates President Cyril Ramaphosa's administration, the dysfunction and feebleness of his administration in the face of this crisis is alarming. We want to remind him that he made a solid commitment to the nation that he was going to champion the fight against corruption in the build-up to Nasrec. He promised to do away with the impunity that was prevalent in the previous administration. We demand more action from the president and fewer penalties and cliches. A strong statement there from COSATU, Theto. Do we know what had happened within COSATU leading to this statement?
Mahlatsi, I have to start, of course, by saying Happy Women's Day to you too. It's a beautiful Women's Day, and it's good to have you too, Juanita. And we do not feel intimidated. We love men. We love the men as well. So
Women's Day, ladies.
Started, Mahlatsi. COSATU has been struggling within its own ranks to find some sort of a way of saying things to the president in a manner that is strong and yet impactful, that also appeals to its members as though they are seen to be doing something rather important in the midst of this crisis. We know that COSATU has said a lot about the president in the past and about the presidency specifically, talking about weaknesses within that office. But what we now know for sure is that they've thrown out the gauntlet. They're basically saying to Ramaphosa that you are either going to do something about corruption, or we are going to walk away from supporting your presidency, which is also an empty promise on its own if interrogated deeply. But I'm sure we will get into that.
Yeah, of course we will get into that because, I was just thinking, Sbu, it's 2.5 years into the president's tenure. COSATU were the first ones there leading to Nasrec to say he is our man and we will support him. And, I think back to former President Jacob Zuma's time, it took many, many years before we had any strong words coming out of COSATU. Were you surprised by this statement, Sbu?
Look, I think in a way, no, because I think that COSATU read the mood within the country. And this is the mood where South Africans are actually tired of the ANC's behavior or tiptoeing around issues of corruption. And I think in a way, as you've referenced, in years prior and in previous ANC conferences dating back to 2007, COSATU took that decision to support Jacob Zuma. But I think also the breakdown and the weakening of COSATU was as a result of that as well, where they left neglected in a way shop floor politics and engaged in party politics or in the succession debate within the ANC. But I think the reality is here, is that President Ramaphosa did rise on that ticket, and most people expected him to be a bit tough on corruption. And that had to do, and I think one of the arguments that was made at the time is that unlike most leaders who rely on the state and who rely on public office to be able to make means. He who is a businessman who's got his assets has got nothing to lose. But I think that what has happened is that there's a feeling that the president is that tough and is not doing enough. I mean, he's made some movements, I mean, in terms of making sure, for instance, signing the proclamation of the SIU, and then last week you heard about the appointment of minister. But I think that South Africans want concrete evidence, or they want to see him being seen to be tough and acting, not just making proclamations and promises, but actually law enforcement agencies being tough on corruption. And I think what also compounds issues and what frustrates people even more is the duplicity that you see and you hear within the ANC. A case in point, you have an ANC NEC which comes out with an unusually strong statement on the issue of corruption. And then a few days later you get, or a day or so later, you get the Secretary General of the ANC, who a few days prior had told South Africans that the ANC is appalled by the levels of corruption and that it will be tough on corruption and that it will also review the relationships or the rules around members of leaders who do state. A few days later, the same person catapults when his direct question is put to him, and he then says that there's nothing wrong with ANC members have been doing business with the state. Now, that actually tells you, if nothing else, but that tells you that Cyril Ramaphosa is not leading a united ANC. And I keep making this point before I give it back to you, Matthias, that Cyril Ramaphosa won the presidency of the ANC and not the conference. And that you see, and what I mean by that is that you see that in the makeup of that NEC, who leads those committees and who leads committees in parliament, and also the kind of discussions and clashes that you see both in public and some that happen in private.
Well, yeah, I mean, I still want us to go deeper into that statement and then what the Secretary General Ace Magashule had to say. And Juanita, maybe let me bring you in because you were quite detailed in your reporting on that discussion that happened inside the NEC. They just simply couldn't agree on what to do against corruption.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, the interesting thing is the disingenuous conversations or the statements that come out from the ANC, in the sense that, we harsh on corruption, but everyone knows that the starting point of corruption and patronage is with no politician themselves will literally do the corruption themselves. They use family members. We know this. We've been around this. We've been through the state capture mill. And so the reality of it is that if you still have party leaders in 2020, after we've been through arms deal and state capture, and now we're in COVID corruption, and you still have people saying, there's nothing wrong if my son does business with the state. The reality of it is that it's not an ideological question. It's not it is an issue of covering up graft. It's an issue of covering up corruption, but the fact that the ANC still had that debate in the midst of a global pandemic, in the midst of the economy tanking on a daily basis, just shows the level of disregard and the disconnect it has with society. Because in 2020, when people have lost their jobs, you are still defending, Ace Magashule's son and his right to do business with the state. Ask him to do business with anyone else, and he won't be able to. The economy is completely bust. And so for me, I feel like when you actually, just the concept of the party having that discussion at this point is enough to show you what really is going on. And sometimes it's difficult to say, but it basically sends that message that everyone is in it for themselves. And that for me is what I get out of, party leaders saying, the law doesn't prevent my son from doing business with the state. The law doesn't, of course the law doesn't, but your ethics and your morals as a leader of the governing party, of the broad church. That needs to guide you to say, my child cannot be benefiting millions and millions while people are starving every day.
Yeah, I think I was quite astounded by this quote that was covered by News 24 in that interview with Ace Magashule. And he said, and I quote, "Tell me of one leader of the ANC who has not done business with government. You are looking at government. People are working with banks," Magashule said. Is that why we are finding the governing party unable to actually take action against corruption, Teto?
Mahlatsi, you know, the bigger picture for me, and I think because we have so many conversations about this, is always the socio-political paradigm in the country, which for me is much more fascinating beyond the ANC politics and beyond the ANC patronage. What we know for sure about patronage is that once it's embedded in a system, and social scientists will tell you this, it will take generations to uproot, and it will literally have to take an entire new set of individuals to be able to lead an organization. The ANC is gone. That is the basis of what we've seen and what we've heard. The ANC does not care about society's interests. It does not care about our healthcare system. It does not care about anything else but itself. We know that, and we have known this for a long time because they have been choosing the ANC over the country so many times. But what fascinates me, Mahlatsi, is what South Africans are doing themselves. In that COSATU statement, I found so many remarkable statements that I could literally turn around and point at COSATU. The word feeble, they use that word to describe the presidency. That is the word I would use to describe COSATU itself and to describe society itself. The fact that we find ourselves in this moment where we are in some sort of a dystopian society, which should be fictional, Mahlatsi, in any other space, but it's real. It's that unbelievable that we have, in the midst of a crisis, people who are literally stealing the most essential, you know, equipment that are supposed to be helping our healthcare workers. Now, I say COSATU is feeble because they let themselves go. They sold themselves to the Zuma presidency in 2007, and they've reaped the rewards of that in the weakening state of that organization. When they say that the presidency is dysfunctional, I say no, you are also dysfunctional. COSATU is also dysfunctional in that it has not been able to, for example, secure wage increases for the public servants that they represented their majority in this particular year. And they are still continuing with this line that somehow we have a political influence and there's a reason for the alliance. Yet there isn't, there has not been for the longest time. And you wonder then what that means about society, because again, I come back, what are South Africans doing? We have a situation in Lebanon where they're living in one of the most repressive, you know, states. And you see people in their millions going out into the streets and saying no to corruption. Yet here we are, we keep on writing about it, we keep on speaking about it, as though it's happening somewhere in another space or another society, except ours. So we should come back to the socio-political, you know, paradigm that I feel includes the role of South Africans, includes the role of civil society, including the unions, including the entire, collective leadership of the country, which includes the opposition as well. Everyone is sleeping on their jobs.
And I think it then begs this, that why are we up in arms now when corruption has been with us for so many years? I mean, just this week, I was just thinking, you know, that 255 million at Nkandla that was spent, and then there was collective responsibility of the NEC. But then there's also this tender bonanza that happened in the Free State that we're hearing about at the State Capture Commission, where, you know, people were given 255 million rand just so that they can go and count how many asbestos roofs are there in that province, and then that money just moved from one company to another. Sbu, are we basically just going through the moment of South Africa where, you know, the ANC is angry now because their country is angry, but in reality, we shouldn't be expecting them to do anything around corruption?
Look, I think for me, Mahlatsi, I'll take you back to 2017. If you would recall where the former president, Kgalema Motlanthe, made the statement actually in his interview with BBC, where he said that the only time that the ANC will get a wake-up call is when it loses power. And I think he repeated that statement last year, and there was a rebuttal from some ANC activists. But I think the reality here is that for as long as the ANC continues to win elections, they will not do anything about it. I mean, I recall a time when there was during the ANC's campaign, I think it was 2014, and Jacob Zuma was going around the country doing campaigning, and I got to the Northwest, I think a day after he had Thuli Madonsela delivered her report, I think on Gandla, one of the reports, I can't recall which one it was. But I mean, when
there have been so many.
that those issues would have been uppermost on people's minds, but the people who are more interested in the issues that related to them, issues of deprivation, issues of poverty, and you can't blame them for that, because you can look at all that is happening within the state, but at the grassroots level, you still find that people only care about what happens in their life. But I think there's also an element where South Africans have become numb to corruption. There's nothing else that shocks us anymore. I think that the ANC, though, this time around, I mean, particularly if you look at the video issue, for instance, and you look at the response of the ANC in Limpopo and the ANC NEC versus what the ANC in Gauteng is doing, and it's chalk and cheese. And the reality is that it is because the ANC in Gauteng knows that we've got local government elections next year. They know that in 2016, they didn't win Joburg. They may have been the majority party, but they didn't get 50%. They didn't win Ekurhuleni, they didn't win Tshwane. They also didn't win Nelson Mandela Bay, for that matter, in the Eastern Cape. And because of that, and the fact that the electoral pie and the electoral share of the ANC in the successive elections since 1994 in Gauteng has been diminishing. I think last year they got 53%, and the election prior they had 54%. So the ANC in Gauteng is in more danger of losing power than the ANC elsewhere. So you can see, and that in a way, I think also informs the behavior of the party and how it has dealt with corruption allegations against the MEC for health, his wife, and also the PEC member, and also the spokesperson to the presidency, Khusela Diko. So you can see that also that the manner in which they're acting is because they know the people of Gauteng are tired of the ANC corruption, and actually tired of the ANC acting with impunity, and they have punished the ANC in previous elections. So I think for me, until that happens elsewhere, the ANC will get a wake-up call. So in a way, I agree in a way with what the statement or the sentiments that are expressed by Kgalema Motlanthe in those interviews.
You know, later on, I want us to actually discuss the Integrity Committee and what it's supposed to do and how they disagree as a party on how to react to it. But let me take this call from Thulani in Guatemala, who is saying COSATU is part of the problem and cannot be the solution. Thulani? Yes. You are saying that COSATU is part of the problem.
Yeah, COSATU is part of the problem. The moment COSATU decided to be a part of the country before the Polokwane watershed, that was the end of COSATU. So COSATU cannot be a solution here. And then COSATU, I don't think we can waste our time in that matter to be talking about COSATU, because as far as where I'm seated, COSATU is there, the Mashazi. It has a remnant of that are left now. So COSATU is no longer COSATU. And then also on the other side, Ramaphosa cannot be fighting corruption while he's talking about the unity. Unity and corruption are two different things. The ANC Mashazi left it NEC, that was the bold to take decision in Polokwane. So the NEC under Zuma, the last 10 years, was a fictional ANC that was willing to sell its soul for money and to get rich. And the utterances by Magashule a few days ago, a real concern to people. But now I heard one of your guests referring to Lebanon. Lebanon politics, Marshals, and our politics are not the same. In Lebanon, there is no party politics. Typically, they will just go to the streets and fight against any corrupt system. But even them, they've allowed the corrupt cabal in Lebanon to be in charge of the country. As for the voters in Gauteng, they can be voting the next day for local government, but nothing will happen, because as long as the voter education in the country, as Chris used to say, you need to teach how democracy works to the people. So people must understand democracy. But in the country, I'm sorry to say, the voters are not that educated because people still don't understand the importance of voting for.
We don't understand the power of the vote. Is that what you're suggesting, Thulani? We still don't understand the power of the vote.
Yes, because if you don't know the power of the vote, and then the country will be doomed like Zimbabwe, like the rest of the world, like of Africa and the Middle East. Because if you don't understand the power of the vote, because you can go to and vote, and tomorrow you will go to the street and bend down the tires and everything. So to finish up, I think the ANC cannot renew itself under this current form. COSATU cannot be the solution of the problems that we're facing in the country until the workers in the country can just stand up, or even the citizens in that matter, to stand up against graft. I think is where we'll be getting a solution in the country.
Thank you very much. That was Thulani in Guatemala, agreeing there in part with my editors saying that the power now is in the people of South Africa, and we can't be looking to the ANC to solve the corruption pandemic that we are facing. Let's take another call now. It's Enoch from Graceland. Enoch, you are saying that we are led by pure criminals. People are stealing cables. I saw that. Literally, you have the railway disappearing.
Yes, and those people that are stealing cables, they're not just stealing cables without knowledge. As we can know, the railway line, it's working with about 3,000 volts of electricity power. So if they have to cut those cables, they have to have inside people who are working for PRASA, who can cut, who can switch off the main switch for them, so that they can cut those high power electricity cables. So they are being assisted by those people who are selected to lead us, to destroy our country. Everything is in tatters because of the African national criminals. It's no more African National Congress. It's African national criminals because it's ruled by criminals. And Cyril Ramaphosa, I can't put him there because he's trying his best. I can see he's trying his best, but the CEO, Ace Magashule, is making matters even worse for everyone in the country because he's untouchable.
Thank you very much. That was Enoch from Graceland. If you're just joining us, it's 28 minutes past 8. My name is Mahlatsi Mahlase. It's the Eyewitness News virtual roundtable. I'm joined by the country's leading political editors. I've got with me Juanita Hunter, who's the political editor at News 24. Sbu Ngalwa is the political editor at Newsroom Africa, and Eyewitness News' senior political reporter, Theto Matlakwana. I just want to bring us back because we are trying to unpack why the ANC is just finding it difficult to handle corruption. And Sbu, you suggested it a bit earlier on, and I'll pass it on to Juanita this time around. The Integrity Committee, Juanita, 1 minute, everybody's being referred to the committee. The next thing, the NEC can't decide or endorse whatever decision of the Integrity Committee. Are we being sold a ruse here when the ANC says that we will hold our members that are bringing the party into disrepute accountable and put them aside?
The ANC Integrity Committee was a PR exercise of 2012 and 2015. And since then, it has held nobody successfully accountable. It is so at some point I fail to understand why we as the public buy into the structure that it will hold anyone accountable. And so when the ANC says that its MEC of Health has to step aside for 4 weeks to undergo a process of the Integrity Committee, what the public doesn't realize is that the MEC is being paid for 4 weeks of work. He's just sitting at home. Secondly, this Integrity Committee, there is no real precedence of the ANC really taking the Integrity Committee report seriously. And they undermine their own Integrity Committee, saying, it doesn't have any teeth. They say things, these are leaders of the ANC saying that it's not properly capacitated, and then it becomes a factional issue. So if you look at the VBS scandal, it became a factional issue that whoever had majority support in the NEC eventually trumped, and those mayors were reinstated. So the same, as far back as the previous Integrity Committee who made a finding against former President Jacob Zuma, and it was laughed at. And then when the ANC meets at conference where they read the mood of the people at the time, they tried to say, we're giving more teeth, we're giving more, we're going to give more powers to the Integrity Committee. We as the media run with it without scrutinizing it. And so the reality of it is, if you just have to ask yourself, if the ANC can't hold, it can't, the promise it made to itself, it can't realize. Do you think that it will realize the promises it made to the public? And I think that this Integrity Committee is it's a nice sort of deflection tool that the ANC now has, so that, this group of elders are considering the matter. And yes, George Mashamba and the team that supports him have made some controversial recommendations, but they know themselves that it's up to the ANC NEC, and that NEC has proven over and over again to not vote in favor, or to not be on the side of integrity, and to be on the side of Yeah.
And I mean, you're right. I mean, I think when we report and say that so-and-so has been referred to the Integrity Committee, we forget to add a line that says they might come back with a recommendation, but the Provincial Executive Committee or the National Executive Committee still has to endorse that decision. I mean, you look at Gauteng, Teto, we had Qedani Mahlangu and we had Brian Hlongwa, and the recommendation there was that they should actually be removed from the party. And under David Makura, the party just decided, no, we're not going to accept that.
Mahlatsi, the same man who this week says to us that he's going to ask the State Security Agency to conduct lifestyle audits on himself and 10 of his MECs. And of course, I have to agree with you that the same person who made that decision, or who led the collective that made the decision to recuse Qedani Mahlangu and Brian Hlongwa, is the same person who's making these concessions now, and all of these requirements of being interrogated, only because they know that they are losing Gauteng unless if something happens that is really dramatic. And I agree with Juanita as well, that it's fine. People can be on a leave of absence, but let's not forget that that means nothing in the bigger scheme of things. If you can still earn a living, if you can still literally feel no punishment, then what's the point of it? And you come back to a situation where the same people will be back in one or other position within government and within the state. And you still have this big question which lingers, which is what exactly are the corrective measures, which is the problem for me, that if we are not going to consider, say, law enforcement as the last buck, which is what is supposed to happen, beyond the Integrity Committee of the ANC, where people must be investigated and must be imprisoned, then there's really no point. You can have the conversation as a party, but we still need to come back and take that party back into society and say, how is it that everyone else gets away with so much crime? During the Nkandla probe, we saw, I think, the real ANC, where we saw people sitting in committees in parliament, painting their nails instead of interrogating this very critical issue. And those people are ministers today. So you have to really wonder who still has faith in the ANC to keep bringing it back into power, and what is it about their thinking and their psyche that has gotten them so attached to this former liberation organization to such a degree that they do not see that they're the very destruction of the country that we're trying to build.
Sbu, I mean, Teto, they're opening wounds that haven't healed. I mean, I just remember the fire pool, as some minister Nhleko told us it was. But the one thing that I think also people are not aware of is that really, the Integrity Committee, its sanctions really are just to set you aside and maybe get the worst punishment or recommendation that we got was for Qedani Mahlangu to leave the party. But beyond that, really, the ANC doesn't seem to have, real mechanisms to hold its members accountable. I mean, I'm thinking now Jacob Kawe last week in that press conference when he was announcing that the MEC Bandile Masuku and presidential spokesperson Khusela Diko are going to step aside, said something around how the Integrity Committee is not a guillotine, but actually it's a political process to get members to realize what they did wrong. And essentially he's correct. That's what it is.
The reality is that people forget that the ANC still has a disciplinary committee. And what the Integrity Committee was meant to be was actually meant to be a bridge between that and court cases, for instance, where they say that it's fine, you can go to court if you are charged with corruption, but what the Integrity Committee can do, it can listen to your case, and based on what it hears, on what evidence you present to them or what your case you present, they can advise you to step aside. But none of that is happening. I mean, if you get someone like the ANC Secretary General saying that I will never step aside for allegations of corruption, there's no other ANC member who will. I mean, if it's not happening at that higher level, and then we then hear that the ANC, the Integrity Committee is actually saying that we keep submitting countless reports, but those reports don't even get to the NEC. The question is that, where do those reports go? Who is blocking those reports? But if the ANC listen to its Integrity Committee, it just shows you how the lack of seriousness with which they take the work that is being done by this very Integrity Committee. And I think that the caller who called in, you could hear what he says. He blames the one party, but then he wants to absolve President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Yes.
A lot. You know, and I think it's wrong to do that, because Cyril Ramaphosa leads that ANC collective.
Yes,
yeah.
Sorry, I want us to just be able to talk about that, because there seems to be that distinction that a lot of our listeners make. But before that, as we conclude at least around this Integrity Committee, let's listen to Themba from Johannesburg, who's saying it's all just a PR exercise.
And your guest, good evening.
Good evening, Themba. Go for it.
Yes, quickly. The Integrity Committee, as one of your guests says, was a public relations exercise, something to give comfort to those that cannot look at the fact that there was no action being instituted against anyone, you know. And the tough reality is popularism is one of the biggest flaws of democracy. So let's just assume, for example, after the elections, ANC is dethroned, it's no longer a party, and we have, by way of example, you can pick any of the parties. One can pick the EFF, the other can pick DA, and let's talk about it. What would South Africa be under a system that is run by popularism? So he who is the most popular in a party is likely to be made the president. Now, any person who is going to be popular is going to be bad news for us. Why? Because any person who doesn't want to end up behind bars will fund the campaign. Any person who wants to smuggle cigarettes in the country will fund that campaign. Any person who's selling drugs, who's trading in, who's part and parcel of the human trafficking problem in the country, is going to put money in politics. Consequently, if you look at all the big names that are involved in high-profile criminal activity, always have a politician not far off from them.
So what's supposed to happen, Themba?
So the challenge is not necessarily with the ANC. The challenge is the system within which we elect presidents. There was a suggestion that was made within the ANC, and oddly enough, it was presented by Dudu, where he said one of the things that they're looking at is to have a single fund that contributes to the different donors contribute to politics in the country, not necessarily a political party. And come election time, I don't know whether it was an equal distribution or a proportional distribution, I don't know.
Yeah.
But whatever the case, money would have then been distributed to political parties. In that way, you would, number one, you would remove those that put money in the hands of politicians. Number two, constitutionally, you need to remove politicians from taking decisions about tenders. There is no way you could solve this problem. It's not an ANC problem. If you have DA seated there, you've seen in Tshwane what are the challenges that are plaguing Tshwane as a direct result of tender-related decisions, of appointments of high senior staff within the office of the mayor and the city managers. Remove politicians from taking those decisions. Let it be like any other position.
Okay.
Spell out what the requirements are. Spell them out. I want somebody who has 10 years experience, who has this type of qualification, and I'm not going to compromise on this. You can, as politicians, agree on that. However, you do not participate on who gets appointed eventually.
You know, thank you.
Move to systems.
Themba, I have to go.
Yeah, of automation. Just one more.
Yeah.
We have to move to systems of automation. We cannot scream for IR, but we still want to have a bid committee, a tender bid committee, taking decisions on who's supposed to get it.
Yeah, those bid committees are supposed to be the ones that help us to remove the politicians from there, but we know that there are influences that always happen there. When we come back from a break, we'll hear from Les in Melville and Herman Mashabas, who's saying that factionalism is entrenched and can't be solved in 4 years. Let me start with Les in Melville. You are saying factionalism is entrenched and can't be solved in 4 years.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi, the line is a bit bad, but
can you hear me?
Allow me to paint an analogy about the ANC, if I may. You see, the ANC is like a bus. The president of the ANC is the driver of the bus. Now, the passengers of the bus are what we need to focus on. It's not about who's driving the bus. It's about the passengers. So I think, if I want to finish off the analogy, Cyril Ramaphosa is the driver of a very disruptive bus, or a bus with very disruptive passengers who he's trying to go one way, the passengers are saying, hey, you're going this way. And, I think he's a bit powerless sometimes in that regard, and he's being a bit unfair on him. And, COVID-19 has just placed added emphasis and just put under the microscope the tendencies of the ANC.
Yeah.
I mean, people stealing money for hand gloves when there are people who really need those things.
Yeah. Les, I'm going to have to cut you short, unfortunately. Yeah? Just wrap up.
What we need to remember about these tender monies, is that during the times of Nasrec and Polokwane, then those monies come out. You guys must remember.
I've heard stories, Les. I've heard stories, Les, where they say that's where the money ends up in funding the ANC's own internal processes. But Sbu, I want to bring you in because Les was raising an issue that you raised earlier where people are differentiating between Cyril Ramaphosa saying that he is trying to drive the bus in the right direction, but the passengers on that bus are just disorderly and just making it impossible for him to do so. Do you agree with that?
Look, I don't agree with that because he's part of that collective. And I think that in fact, what you keep hearing, the fact that you still have people like Les and the first caller who still feel that they distinguish between the good and the bad within the ANC is a moment that Cyril Ramaphosa should be seizing. But he's failing to seize that moment because I think that there's still a lot of goodwill that the South Africans are willing to allow him and to grant him as the leader of the ANC, in that they see him as this president. In fact, it has not changed from how he came into power. That's how they saw him. And even with the anger that you see, the fact that you still hearing people speaking as Les is done, and as the first caller did, where they actually want to distinguish between a Cyril Ramaphosa and a Magashule, for instance, shows you how actually the president is failing to rise to the moment and actually to be tough towards his own comrades. I believe that he actually has nothing to lose, but I think that what COVID-19 and what these issues of corruption have shown us is that he's not as strong as as South Africans would have liked him to be. Obviously, surely, he's a better choice than a Jacob Zuma, because Jacob Zuma was the worst of the lot. But at the very least, that there was an expectation that Cyril Ramaphosa will be firm, will have a firm hand, and will be able to act against his very comrades and speak against corruption.
But I'm going to bring Juanita in here and ask, what else should Cyril be doing? Because I'm hearing his people arguing that from a government point of view, he has gone on to try and support and give resources to key agencies, whether it's the SIU, it's the NP, it's the National Prosecuting Authority, etc., etc. And we've heard him speak out against corruption. What else should he be doing, Juanita?
Mahlatsi, the thing is that when Cyril Ramaphosa was campaigning for the presidency, he didn't say, I'm going to put processes in place, therefore slowly capacitate the NPA. That's not what he said. He said, they're literally verbatim, there's going to be people in orange overalls. So the expectation from Cosatu and from others is that was that you promised. Nobody else was making that promise. You made that promise. And now you want to say in retrospect that, I can't interfere in the work of the NPA. Nobody's saying that you need to interfere in the work of the NPA, but if there is a reasonable suspicion of corruption against anyone, you need to set an example. If you are a corrupt person who's in cabinet or is in the ANC NEC, there's no deterrent for you. There isn't a set to say, I must be afraid because this man, and that's what you need from a president, because of the fish rots from the head. And that's what we saw in the Jacob Zuma era of why corruption and state capture was so pervasive, was because it was right from the top. And the whole argument of why there was a sister say, no, Ramaphosa is going to change things because he won't be a corrupt person, was that you fix the top and then it will filter all the way through. But what we have seen, as Pooh said, is that you haven't seen that precedent. You haven't seen Ramaphosa, talking tough on corruption. I can talk tough against crime and I can steal a car. I can do that. And the reality of it is that he made that specific promise that his the whole optimism, because why did the ANC get that mandate that it got in 2019 was based on this particular promise, which was an empty promise, and the ANC got an undeserved mandate. And the reason why it got it was that people believed that he's going to turn the tide of corruption. So making a few appointments here and talking about a fusion center and a cabinet committee that has no powers, that just falls into this PR exercise. And so the reality of it, and you see from the Cosatu statement, is that the fight against corruption in the Ramaphosa administration has been a PR exercise.
I see Teto nodding away there, Teto. But guys, I always want to ask, if he is saying that I can only capacitate the NPA and the SIU, etc. If I get involved, then I'll be seen as interfering. You seem to suggest that he could be doing more, Teto.
Look, Mahlatsi, it's the fact that he could be doing more, not just doing more, but he could be setting up systems that are actually functionaries which are going to be able to work. There's the appointments. We see all of that. There's Shamila Batoyi, and we're all excited with this new head of the NPA that was a woman with so much experience that she had, and we had faith that something would happen. But again, I come back to what Juanita says, that leadership requires that you possess skills that the rest of us don't. That's why you're in that position. Now, the problem that we've had in this country, which comes through so strongly through the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, is a problem we've had across all sectors, in fact. I think South Africa has a serious leadership problem, and it's seen in how the ANC itself is unable to even deploy the best from within themselves into government positions. And, I want to also touch on a point that was made by Themba earlier around how politicians should not even be involved in tenders. And he's right, because they are not involved in tenders. Who is involved in tenders is supposed to be, public servants. It's supposed to be people who work for the state. So now, because we have literally this thin line which has blurred completely between state and party, and only because of the ANC and only because it's the quickest way to enable corruption, you see public servants who maybe have gone into the public service to do right by South Africans and serve the country, also being embroiled in corruption, because when the political pressure comes and you have to face the prospect of the idea of losing your job, the highly likely option you'll take is to do what it is that the political leader is saying in that particular department or entity that you are in. So Ramaphosa has failed for me in so many ways, because minus the orange overalls, you cannot keep saying the same thing to everyone. You can't say the same speech to the thieves as you do to the right people, to the righteous people. He's so gentle with everyone. And even within the NEC, he does not come out strongly to say to his face that actually this is what I will not tolerate, that this is for me the last bag, and we must ensure that that integrity committee and the disciplinary committee, serve their purposes. He's not doing that. In fact, he's saying very nice speeches that are really indeed PR engineered to be for a person who is impartial, and he's not impartial. There's a decision to be made. This country is thinking, because Cosatu was right. It's thinking under the weight of corruption.
Teto, let me go to Dominic from Wellington in the Western Cape, and he's saying that Herman Mashaba's party wants to fight corruption. Are you saying that's our only hope?
I don't know. I would like your guest to maybe comment on that, to what extent his party would be a viable alternative to South Africans who are just really, really sick of corruption.
I send it to Zbungalo. Would Herman Mashaba solve our corruption pandemic?
Look, I think, I mean, as any politician, the proof will be in the pudding. I think the reality is that, I mean, Herman Mashaba says all the right things, but I think there are issues in the city of Johannesburg, questionable tenders that were entered into during his term of office. And I mean, he has distanced himself from those. But the reality is that I think in terms of how he was received by the people of Gauteng and being bold, I think the one thing that he did, which was good for him, is the fact that he's not a career politician, where he was seen to be making decisions that are popular decisions, which probably endeared him to people like the EFF, unlikely bedfellows really for someone like a Herman Mashaba.
And somebody might say that he doesn't have the weight of towing the party line, and that's how we saw the relationship between him and the DA coming to an end. Let me go to Mudikeng in Katlehong. You are saying that infrastructure is dilapidated, but comrades just want to benefit.
Yes, infrastructure is dilapidated solely for one fact, that comrades, it's a clear program that when it dilapidates, when it has to be refurbished, only comrades are going to benefit. And on the other hand, the very same money that is being inflated in pricing the doing of the job, it goes back into the coffers of the party to run the daily runnings of the party. It's unfortunate that the factionalism within the ANC is so rife to an extent that it affects the country very badly.
Thank you very much. That was Mudikeng in Katlehong. We're quickly running out of time. And I want us, as we wrap up, Juanita, ask the question, right? Can we expect one individual, Cyril Ramaphosa, to solve this pandemic? Or is it time that we actually have an overhaul of the way the tender system actually operates? And that could be the only way out.
Yeah. I think that, the PFMA, and the problem in South Africa is that we never had bad laws. We don't have bad laws. We just have a system that's broken. And I think that, so the starting point is you need to see people, we need to set an example. And wherever that example comes from, it needs to happen. And it cannot be that in the last 14 years, this is according to the Justice Minister's parliamentary reply, there was only 5 people successfully prosecuted for financial mismanagement or financial misconduct in local government, of which most of those people had sentences overturned. And so the system is completely broken. When every year the Auditor General literally talks about mismanagement and wasteful expenditure, irregular expenditure, and you literally had 5 people who went to jail in 14 years and with no real consequence. And I think that needs to change. That if anything, political survival and I think the optimism that Ramaphosa had from the public that he can change things. I don't think it's too late from using that public optimism and that Ramaphoria that we once saw to use that to empower him to be able to set a precedent. And setting a precedent doesn't mean that you as a president interfere in prosecutions, but the reality of it is that you cannot sit on the fence. If a president sits on the fence with the same looters and on the people that they're looting from, then you're neither here nor there, and you may as well just be looting yourself.
So he has to pull away from what the conversations are in the NEC and actually be standing outside of what the NEC is saying. Teto, do you agree with what Juanita is saying? And as you quickly wrap up and then go to Zbu and say, can we actually see that happening? Teto?
Mahlatsi, for me, it's always South Africa first. This country matters way too much for us to allow the ANC and its patronage networks to destroy. The economy is literally on its knees. It's been for years. businesses struggling, investors look at us and they wonder what is there to keep their money going, even to just trust us. So I think that the time for talking is over. I expect South Africans to do a whole lot more. I don't think it's enough that we keep having these conversations. It's not enough that we're angry and that we all discuss it in our WhatsApp groups. There needs to be a concerted effort from South Africans to say that we have the power. That's why we're in a democratic state after all. Let's use that power.
Sbu, you've got 45 seconds to wrap up this conversation.
I think, Mahlatsi, you asked the question before, what should the president do beyond referring some of these things to some of these issues to law enforcement agencies? The reality is that I think it begins with his own appointments, which some of them are seriously flawed, where he can it starts with that, where he can appoint a deputy president, even though he has allegations over his head. But I think what is more shameful for me is the fact that you can have people who inflate prices of PPE by 400% at a time when in this country we have health workers who are dying because of PPE, who are complaining every day. I mean, I think it's an unforgivable crime. And it actually explains why South Africans are so angry. And those are the kind of issues that he must be tough on.
I think the next conversation we should be having is around how to overhaul this whole tender system so that we finally take it out of politicians. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. That has been Inside Eyewitness News. My name is Mahlatsi Mahlase. It's 9 o'clock.